The town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where secrets lingered behind lace curtains and gossip traveled faster than the wind. Everyone knew everyone, or at least they thought they did. For 30 years, Henry Callahan believed he knew his wife, Margaret. She was quiet, devout, and kept the house in perfect order. Their marriage, though distant at times, was steady. To the neighbors, they were a model couple, but beneath the ordinary rhythm of their lives, a shadow waited. On a cold autumn evening, Henry sat at the kitchen table, his calloused hands wrapped around a glass of bourbon. The old clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Margaret moved about the kitchen, her movements precise, almost rehearsed. "Margaret," Henry said suddenly, his voice heavy, "you ever wonder what people would think if they knew all our truths?" She froze, the knife in her hand hovering above a loaf of bread. Slowly, she looked at him, her eyes calm but sharp. "Some truths are better left buried, Henry." The words felt like a stone dropped into his chest. He had heard whispers, fragments of something he couldn't quite piece together, papers hidden in the attic, old letters signed with another name, medical bills that didn't add up that night. When Margaret went to bed, Henry stayed awake. The bourbon gave him courage, or maybe madness. He climbed into the attic, the old floor groaning beneath his boots. Dust swirled in the air as he pulled down a battered box. Inside were documents siloed, brittle but damning, a birth certificate, a medical record, and a name that wasn't Margaret. His hands shook as he read the words, "Assigned male at birth." The room spun. For 30 years he had lived in what he thought was truth, but it was a carefully constructed lie. His mind filled with images, wedding photos, anniversaries, the cold distance of their marriage bed. A lie stretching across decades. When Margaret awoke to find Henry sitting in the dark living room, papers spread across the coffee table, she knew the facade had shattered. "What is this?" Henry's voice cracked like a whip. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. Margaret didn't answer immediately. She sat across from him, folding her hands neatly in her lap. There was no panic, only resignation. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," she whispered. Henry slammed his fist on the table, the glass rattling. 30 years, Margaret. 30 years you let me live like a fool. What are you?" "I'm your wife," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm in his eyes. "I always have been." But the word wife now tasted like ash to Henry. The house seemed to shrink around them, the silence between each breath heavy and suffocating. His thoughts twisted into something dark, something violent. He could feel the weight of the revolver upstairs, tucked away in the nightstand drawer. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless, and that helplessness burned like acid in his veins. As the clock struck midnight, Henry stood. His chair scraped against the floor, sharp and final. Margaret lowered her gaze. She had lived with this fear for decades that truth, once revealed, would not bring freedom but destruction. Henry's footsteps on the stairs sounded like a verdict being delivered. And in that moment, the quiet marriage of Henry and Margaret Callahan began to unravel into a nightmare. The bedroom was dark, the air heavy with silence. Henry's hands trembled as he opened the drawer of the nightstand, the wood groaning like it disapproved of what was hidden inside. The revolver lay there, cold, gleaming faintly in the dim light seeping through the curtains. It was more than a weapon, it was a relic, handed down from his father. A man who had preached that real men never let themselves be deceived. Henry stared at it for a long time, his reflection distorted in the metal. 30 years of marriage, 30 years of believing a lie. He felt humiliation coil around his throat like a snake. Every kiss, every shared meal, every polite smile at church now seemed poisoned. 30 years, he muttered under his breath. His voice cracked, brittle, like old glass. Downstairs, Margaret sat motionless, her hands folded in her lap. She could hear the creaks of the floorboards above each step Henry took echoing like a death knell. She knew where he was going. She had always known this moment might come. For decades, she had crafted a life built on secrecy, praying the truth would stay buried. But truth, she knew, was like water, it seeped through even the smallest cracks. Henry returned to the living room, revolver in hand. His shadow stretched long across the walls, distorted and monstrous. He didn't point the gun, not yet. He simply held it like an unspoken threat. Margaret's eyes flicked to it, then back to Henry's face. Her voice was calm, though her heart pounded in her chest. "Henry, please. I never wanted to hurt you, hurt me." Henry's laugh was hollow, jagged. "You made me a fool, Margaret. My whole life, people saw me with you. What do they think of me now? What will they say when they find out?" His rage wasn't only about her deception, it was about the mirror it held up to him, about the fragile masculinity that now felt mocked by the world. Margaret's voice trembled slightly. "I loved you. I gave you a life, a home, companionship. Isn't that real?" Henry's eyes burned, but his hand shook. The weight of the revolver was both intoxicating and terrifying. He wanted control again, to take back the years stolen from him, or so he told himself. The ticking of the clock filled the silence. Each second was a reminder that the choice was closing in on him. In the corner of the room, a faded wedding photograph stared back at them. Two younger faces, smiling, unaware of the storm that would one day consume them. Henry's breath grew ragged. "You should have told me, Margaret. You should have given me the choice." "I was afraid," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "Afraid that you would do exactly this." The revolver twitched in his hand. His finger hovered near the trigger. For a fleeting moment, Henry saw the years, the laughter, the small kindnesses, the quiet rituals of married life. A fragile, complicated love, built on both truth and lies. It almost softened him, almost, but then shame returned, hot and unforgiving. Drowning out any trace of tenderness, Henry raised the gun. Margaret closed her eyes. The house, once filled with silence, now pulsed with the weight of impending violence. The revolver lingered in the air like a verdict not yet delivered. Henry's chest rose and fell with labored breaths, his finger brushing the trigger, but refusing, for now, to press. The silence between him and Margaret wasn't just silence, it was 30 years of lies, devotion, and betrayal congealed into a single, unbearable moment. Margaret opened her eyes slowly, refusing to flinch. "Henry," she said softly, "if you're going to kill me, at least look at me. Don't look at the gun. Look at the person who stood beside you for 30 years. Her words pierced through the haze of rage, but they didn't dissolve it. Henry's jaw clenched, his eyes wet with something he couldn't name: anger, shame, grief. "Don't you dare talk to me about 30 years, he spat. "Those years are ashes now, lies." Margaret leaned forward slightly, her hands still folded as if in prayer. Were they? Think about it. Who cooked for you when you worked late shifts? Who held your hand at your mother's funeral? Who stayed when you lost your job? That wasn't a lie, Henry. That was me. The revolver shook in Henry's hand. His thoughts spiraled, tangled between truth and deception. Could love exist alongside lies? Was it possible that what she said was real, even if her identity had been hidden? His mind rebelled against the idea, yet the memories clawed at him, her laughter echoing in their kitchen, her quiet comfort when nightmares came. Stop it, Henry roared, slamming the revolver against the arm of the chair. The sound rang through the room, sharp as a gunshot. Margaret's shoulders tensed, but she didn't cry out. She had lived her life anticipating this very storm. Fear had been her silent companion for decades. She exhaled slowly, voice steady. You're angry because you feel betrayed. I understand. But Henry, if you pull that trigger, the world will not remember you as a man reclaiming his dignity. They will remember you as a murderer. The words landed heavy, like lead. Henry's hand tightened, knuckles white around the revolver. He pictured the courtroom, the eyes of neighbors, the whispers in church pews. They would pity him, but they would never respect him again. They would see him as weak, broken, desperate. Respect, Henry muttered, almost to himself. Do you think I care what they think? I can't even look at myself in the mirror anymore. Margaret's gaze softened, and for the first time, her voice cracked. Henry, I loved you. Every day, I loved you. That was the only truth that mattered to me. The room darkened as a storm outside gathered strength. Rain began to patter against the windows, a distant rumble of thunder underscoring the tension. The flickering light from the lamp cast long shadows on the walls, shadows that seemed to lean closer. Listening, Henry lowered the revolver slightly, his arm heavy with indecision. His mind replayed the decades, both tender and false. It was a cruel paradox. Everything he cherished was real, and yet built on a lie. Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. If you're going to end me, at least know this: I never deceived you to hurt you. I only wanted to live, to be loved, and you gave me that. The thunder cracked louder now, rattling the glass in the windows. Henry flinched, his grip tightening again. The storm inside him clashed with the storm outside, both spiraling toward an inevitable break. The revolver rose once more, aimed directly at Margaret, and in that suspended moment, the house itself seemed to hold its breath. The storm raged louder, hammering rain against the house as though the sky itself demanded judgment. Henry's hand stayed locked around the revolver, but his finger hovered, hesitant. His face was pale, damp with sweat. Every second stretched like hours. Margaret didn't move. Her stillness was almost unnerving, as if she had surrendered to fate long ago. She spoke softly, her voice nearly drowned by the storm. Henry, if you kill me, you'll kill the only person who ever loved you without conditions. Henry's laugh was sharp, bitter, broken. Unconditional. You call 30 years of lies unconditional. His voice cracked on the last word, trembling with the weight of grief. You think truth is simple. Margaret's tone rose, her calm cracking under his rage. You think I chose this? Do you know what it was like to grow up trapped in a body that never felt like mine? Do you know what it meant to survive in a world that would have killed me for being who I am? Henry, My truth was survival. And in that survival, I found you. The words stabbed Henry's chest. He wanted to ignore them, wanted to cling to the betrayal, but the tremor in her voice was raw, too raw to be false. His thoughts swirled, colliding memories of the woman he knew with the revelation of the man he didn't. His voice dropped to a whisper. Then why didn't you tell me? Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears now. Because I was terrified. Terrified you'd leave. Terrified you'd hate me. And most of all terrified you'd do exactly what you're doing right now. The revolver lowered a fraction, the weight of it pulling at Henry's trembling arm. He felt as though his entire body might collapse under the burden of betrayal and longing. You should have trusted me, trusted you. Margaret's tears finally spilled. You don't know what trust costs people like me. One wrong word, one wrong person and it's over. I trusted you enough to marry you, to build a life with you, but I couldn't risk everything, Henry. I couldn't risk losing you. The storm cracked open the night again, lightning illuminating the room in blinding flashes. For a moment, Henry saw her not as an enemy, not as a liar, but as a fragile human being who had lived her entire life balancing on the edge of exposure. Still, anger clawed at him, refusing to let go. He slammed the revolver onto the coffee table, the thud echoing like a gunshot. Margaret jumped, startled, her hand flying to her mouth. Henry leaned forward, his voice low and trembling. You don't understand what you've taken from me. 30 years, Margaret. 30 years thinking I was building a family, a legacy, all built on sand. What am I now? What was I then? Margaret's voice broke as she whispered, You were loved. That's what you were. That's what you are. Nothing changes that. But Henry shook his head violently. To him, everything had changed. The world he thought he knew, the wife he thought he loved, the man he thought he was, it was all collapsing around him, one revelation at a time. The revolver sat between them on the table, gleaming in the flickering lamplight. Both stared at it, each knowing it was more than just a weapon. It was the hinge upon which their entire future swung. Thunder roared again, the storm's fury mirroring Henry's. His breathing was ragged, his eyes wild. Margaret reached out, her hand trembling but steady in intent, moving toward his. For the first time in hours, Henry didn't pull away, but his eyes stayed locked on the gun. The storm outside grew violent, but the greater storm was the one between them where love and rage battled for dominance, and no one could predict which would win. The night pressed heavier, as though the house itself was suffocating under the weight of secrets. Rain streaked across the windows in chaotic patterns, lightning flashing like a strobe of impending doom. The revolver still sat on the table, silent but screaming, its presence splitting the room into two worlds, life and death. Henry's chest rose and fell in erratic rhythm. His eyes burned from the tears he refused to shed. For decades he had seen himself as a man in control, a husband, a provider, the one who made sense of the world. But now, his very identity was unraveling thread by thread, leaving him naked in the storm of truth. Margaret reached for his hand again, her palm trembling yet resolute. Her voice quivered. Henry, please, don't let anger blind you to the 30 years we've shared. We laughed, we cried, we survived. That was real. His head snapped toward, her eyes wild, real. The word was spat out like venom. He leaned closer, his face inches from hers, his voice a hiss. Do you know what real means? Real means truth. Real means no secrets. Real means I don't wake up one morning realizing my life is a lie. Margaret flinched at the sharpness of his words, but she didn't retreat. It was never a lie. It was love. Love doesn't vanish because of anatomy. Love is built on memories, moments, and sacrifices. You can't erase that with one revelation. Henry slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the revolver. The sound made her jump. His mind replayed their wedding, the children they never had, the neighbors' questions they dodged. He felt mocked, ridiculed by life itself. His inner voice screamed, "You're a fool." Henry, 30 years blind. The storm surged, rattling the walls as if demanding an end. Henry stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. Do you know what people will say? Do you know what this makes me? A joke? A man who couldn't see the truth right in front of him. 30 years of lies, Margaret. 30 years. Margaret rose slowly, her movements cautious as though approaching a wounded predator. Henry, listen to me. I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to survive, to love, to live without fear. If I had told you back then, you would have walked away. I would have lost everything. But I gained 30 years with you. 30 years of happiness, even if they're crumbling now. Henry stopped pacing, his back to her. He whispered, his voice breaking, I don't know who I am anymore. Tears streaked down Margaret's face. You're the same man who held me through storms, who made me laugh when the world was cruel, who loved me enough to build a life with me. That doesn't vanish because of one truth. But Henry's silence was heavier than thunder. His hand twitched as he glanced at the revolver again. The weapon seemed to call to him, promising an end to his humiliation, an answer to his rage. Margaret, sensing the danger, stepped closer, her voice low, pleading, Henry, look at me. Don't let hate define you. Don't let this gun decide our story. If you pull that trigger, you destroy everything good we ever had. Henry turned slowly, his face etched with torment. His hand hovered over the revolver. His eyes locked with hers, love, anger, betrayal, and grief colliding in a storm far deadlier than the one outside. Lightning struck, illuminating the room in blinding white. And in that frozen moment, Henry's trembling fingers wrapped around the gun once more. The breaking point had arrived. The air was brittle with silence, so sharp it could cut. Only the ticking of the old grandfather clock dared to intrude, its pendulum swinging like a countdown to doom. Henry's fingers gripped the revolver, sweat slicking the metal. Each breath he took came out jagged, like glass scraping his lungs. Margaret's eyes never left him. She could see the man she had loved for 30 years, standing on the edge of a precipice, teetering between rage and restraint. Henry, she whispered, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry through the storm's roar outside. Don't do this. I know you feel betrayed, but ending my life won't erase your pain. His voice cracked. You lied to me for 30 years. 30 years, Margaret. Every touch, every word, it's all poisoned now. His face twisted in anguish, his hand raising the revolver ever so slightly. Margaret took a slow step forward, her palms raised. The storm rattled the windows as if nature itself begged him to stop. It wasn't poison, it was love. Every kiss, every night we held each other, those moments were real. You can't deny that. Henry's grip tightened. His mind spiraled through decades of memories, anniversaries, Christmas mornings. The way Margaret's laugh had once been the anchor that held his world steady. His inner voice whispered cruelly, "All lies. She fooled you. The whole town will laugh," he barked, shaking his head violently, as if to drive away the memories. "You don't understand. This isn't about love anymore. This is about me. About the man I thought I was, on the fool I've become." Margaret's tears blurred her vision, but she pressed on, desperation carving each word. "You're not a fool, Henry. You're human. Humans love, humans forgive, humans fight for the people they care about. Don't let one truth drown 30 years of us." For a moment, the gun lowered. A flicker of doubt, of mercy lit Henry's eyes. But then came the crushing wave of humiliation, the image of neighbors whispering, the unbearable idea of being mocked as the man who never knew. The shame was too much. Henry's jaw clenched. I can't live like this." Margaret's breath hitched. "Then let me help you. We can face it together. Please." But the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm within. His hand steadied, the revolver aimed. His finger curled against the trigger. Margaret closed her eyes, whispering one last word, "I love you." The gun roared, shattering the night. Thunder rolled in its wake, as if the heavens themselves condemned the act. Margaret's body collapsed to the floor, lifeless, crimson pooling beneath her. Henry stood frozen, deafened by the ringing in his ears, the smell of gunpowder clinging to the air. The storm raged, lightning illuminating the crime he had committed. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor beside her. The revolver clattering against the hardwood, his breath came in ragged sobs. "What have I done?" The clock ticked on, indifferent, as though marking the exact moment love turned into murder. And Henry, once a man built on stability, was left in ruins, shattered by truth, consumed by rage, and haunted by the ghost of 30 years. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was far more sinister. The rain had stopped hammering the windows, leaving only the faint dripping from the eaves. Inside, the house felt hollow, emptied of its soul. Margaret's body lay motionless on the floor, her blood seeping into the cracks of the hardwood, darkening like a shadow that would never leave. Henry sat, slumped in the armchair, the revolver still hanging from his trembling hand. His eyes were fixed on nothing, his face ashen, like a ghost who hadn't realized he was dead. Each tick of the grandfather clock echoed louder, a reminder that time was moving forward while his world had collapsed, his mind fractured between past and present. He saw Margaret smiling on their wedding day, radiant in her white gown, the sound of her laughter echoing in their first home. Then he saw her lifeless eyes staring into the void. His chest heaved with sobs, but no tears came. He was too hollow to cry. The front door creaked. A neighbor, worried after hearing the gunshot, cautiously peeked inside. "Henry," the man called out, voice shaky. When his eyes fell on the scene, he staggered back, hand clamped over his mouth. "Oh my God. Henry, what have you done?" Henry didn't move. His voice was flat, almost mechanical. "I ended the lie. 30 years of lies. It's over now." The neighbor bolted outside, shouting for help. his footsteps splashing in puddles as he vanished into the night. Sirens soon pierced the air, growing louder, until the red and blue glow of patrol cars painted the house in chaotic light. Officers burst through the door, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon," one of them shouted. The command barely registered, but Henry obeyed, letting the revolver slip from his hand and clatter onto the floor. His gaze never left Margaret's body. 2 officers cuffed him, dragging him to his feet. He didn't resist. He had no strength left to fight. As they led him out into the flashing stormlight, neighbors gathered in stunned silence, whispering, pointing, their faces blurred into one, a chorus of judgment he could feel burning into his skin. Detective Laura Grayson, hardened by years of grisly cases, stepped inside, surveying the scene with a practiced eye. The blood, the revolver, the shattered husband, every detail screamed of tragedy. But something in Margaret's face lingered with her, not fear, but sorrow, as though even in death she mourned the man who had pulled the trigger. Henry sat in the back of the squad car, hands bound, staring blankly ahead. His reflection in the glass looked foreign, as if he were watching someone else's downfall. Inside his head, a single sentence repeated like a broken record. She lied. I loved her. I killed her. The rain began again, soft and relentless, washing over the house that had once held decades of love. Now it was only a crime scene, a place where truth had finally surfaced and destroyed everything. And Henry, once the devoted husband, was now a murderer, the man who couldn't bear the weight of reality, the man whose love had twisted into violence. The night moved on, indifferent to the tragedy it carried. But inside Henry's mind, time had stopped forever. The sterile walls of the police station hummed under harsh fluorescent lights. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disinfectant, a far cry from the storm Henry had just left behind. He sat at a steel table in the interrogation room, wrists cuffed, his posture rigid but defeated. His face was pale, eyes sunken with the weight of what he had done. Detective Laura Grayson entered quietly, a folder tucked under her arm. She had seen countless killers across her career, but Henry wasn't like the others. He wasn't hardened, wasn't smug. He was broken, like a man who had cut off his own limb. Henry, she said softly, taking a seat across from him. Do you understand why you're here? His lips trembled, voice hoarse. I shot her. 30 years. And I didn't know the truth until tonight. His eyes darted up, wide and haunted. She lied to me. My whole life was a lie. Laura opened the folder, revealing photographs, wedding portraits, medical records, identification papers. Margaret lived as a woman for decades. By all accounts, she loved you, Henry. Neighbors, friends, everyone saw your marriage as one of the strongest. Henry slammed his cuffed fists on the table, the sound echoing sharply. Strong, strong, built on lies. Every kiss, every whisper, every I love you, all poisoned. His breathing quickened, each inhale ragged dot. Laura studied him. And yet, you stayed with her for 30 years. Did you ever feel unloved? The question pierced him. His jaw tightened as memories flooded in. Late-night talks, holding her hand during sickness, laughter echoing across vacations, the comfort of her presence after long days. He had never doubted her love. She lied, he repeated, weaker this time, almost to convince himself. But she did love me. Laura leaned forward, her voice low but steady. "So tell me, Henry, did you kill her because of who she was, or because you couldn't face what that meant for you?" Silence suffocated the room. His throat bobbed as he tried to answer, but no words came. Tears threatened, yet never fell. The door creaked, and another officer entered with a report. He handed it to Laura, who scanned the paper quickly before looking back at Henry. "Autopsy confirms Margaret had been sick for years. She didn't have long to live. She wasn't hiding it to hurt you. She was trying to protect you." Henry's head snapped up, confusion clouding his expression. "Protect me? From what?" "She knew you, knew your world. She feared that if the truth came out, it would destroy you. And she was right, wasn't she?" Henry's shoulders slumped. The room seemed smaller now, pressing in on him. His entire body sagged with exhaustion, the fight gone. "I loved her," he whispered, almost childlike. "I loved her more than anything, and I killed her." Laura closed the folder gently, her gaze firm. "That's what the jury will see. Not a man who discovered the truth, but a man who chose violence over love." The fluorescent lights flickered above them, buzzing like a wasp trapped in a jar. Henry bowed his head, the weight of his choices finally crushing him. For the first time, he wasn't replaying Margaret's lies. He was replaying her laughter, her smile, her warmth, the life he had destroyed. The detective rose, signaling the officer. "Take him back to holding." As the door shut behind him, the interrogation room grew quiet again, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Henry Walker wasn't just a murderer. He was a man who couldn't live with the truth or without the lie. The courthouse loomed like a cathedral of judgment, its stone pillars casting long shadows across the crowded steps. Reporters clustered at the entrance, microphones raised, cameras flashing as Henry Walker was escorted inside in an orange jumpsuit, shackles rattling with each step. The quiet man who had lived 30 years in suburban obscurity was now the centerpiece of a sensational trial. Inside the courtroom, the air buzzed with anticipation. Every seat was filled neighbors, old co-workers, curious strangers. They wanted answers. They wanted to see the man who had built a marriage on love, only to shatter it with a bullet. Henry sat at the defense table, shoulders slumped, his gray hair slicked back but unkempt. His lawyer whispered strategies, but Henry barely listened. His gaze was locked on the empty chair where Margaret would never sit. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn Cross, began her opening statement with a voice like steel. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about deception. It is not about identity. It is about murder." Henry Walker discovered a truth about his wife, a truth that shocked him, but instead of seeking understanding, instead of choosing compassion, he chose a gun. He ended a life in cold blood. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Henry closed his eyes, each word slicing deeper than the last. The defense attorney rose, pacing deliberately before the jury. "This case is about betrayal. Imagine living 30 years beside someone you loved, only to learn that your life together was built on lies." Henry Walker was deceived in the most intimate, devastating way possible. His actions, while tragic, were the result of unbearable emotional collapse. He is not a monster. He is a broken man. Henry's heart pounded as witnesses were called. Neighbors described the Walkers as inseparable. A friend of Margaret testified about her secret struggles with identity, her fear of losing Henry if the truth came out. Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she spoke. She loved him more than her own truth. Henry wanted to scream, to tell them all that he had loved Margaret fiercely, that every word, every kiss, every shared dream was real. But his voice was gone, swallowed by guilt. Then came the evidence. The gun, the medical examiner's report, the haunting 911 call. With Henry's trembling voice, she lied to me. I couldn't take it anymore. The courtroom fell silent, the tape echoing like a confession carved in stone. Finally, Henry was called to testify. He stood slowly, hands shaking as he swore the oath. Facing the jury, his voice was cracked, hollow. I loved her. God help me, I loved her more than life. But when I found out, it was like the ground vanished under me. I didn't see her anymore. I saw betrayal. I saw 30 years of lies. And I snapped. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. Evelyn Cross rose for cross-examination, her eyes unrelenting. Mr. Walker, you claim you loved your wife. If that is true, then tell this court, was it love that pulled the trigger or hate? The question struck like a hammer. Henry's lips parted, but no answer came. The silence was louder than any denial. The jury watched, unblinking, as the man before them crumbled under the weight of his own contradictions. The trial was no longer about Margaret's secret. It was about the choice Henry made when love collided with rage, and the world was ready to judge him. The jury filed back into the courtroom, their expressions unreadable, a dozen masks concealing the weight of their decision. The tension was suffocating. Every shuffle of paper, every cough, every scrape of a chair echoed like thunder in the silent chamber. Henry Walker sat motionless at the defense table, his shackled hands folded tightly together. He had barely slept in weeks, replaying the same night in his mind until every detail blurred into madness. Margaret's last look, the gun's recoil, the blood. He could never erase it. The judge, an austere man with deep lines carved into his face, looked down from the bench. Mr. Foreman, has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, stood. Yes, Your Honor, we have. He handed the folded slip to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. Henry's breath caught in his chest. The room leaned forward as the paper was unfolded. The judge read aloud, on the charge of second-degree murder. We find the defendant, Henry Walker, guilty. Gasps surged through the gallery. Some shook their heads in sorrow, others in grim satisfaction. The weight of 30 years of love, betrayal, and tragedy collapsed into a single word: guilty. Henry didn't flinch. His eyes were fixed on the empty chair beside him, the place where Margaret used to sit during family dinners, where her voice used to soothe his fears, where laughter once filled the space. He whispered under his breath, "I'm sorry, Maggie. I wasn't strong enough." The prosecutor's lips tightened, her case sealed. The defense attorney lowered his gaze, defeated but not surprised. The judge's gavel struck. Henry Walker, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The sound reverberated like a coffin lid slamming shut. Henry's knees buckled slightly as guards took him by the arms. He didn't resist. He welcomed the chains, the bars, the silence that awaited him. In some twisted way, it felt like justice as he was led from the courtroom. Flashbulbs exploded outside the doors. Reporters shouted questions. "Henry, do you regret it? Did you ever truly love her? What would Margaret say now?" But Henry said nothing. His silence was the only truth left in the months that followed. The story of Henry and Margaret Walker became a grim fascination. Documentaries dissected their lives, psychologists debated identity and betrayal, and true crime shows replayed the 911 call on loop. Some painted Henry as a victim of deception, others as a murderer who let rage consume him in the end. Their story was no longer theirs, it belonged to the world. A cautionary tale carved into the cultural memory. Henry lived the rest of his days behind gray walls, each night haunted by Margaret's ghost. He spoke to her in whispers, in dreams, in the silence between footsteps on the prison floor. Sometimes he imagined her smiling, forgiving him. Other times her eyes glared with betrayal. Love had carried them for 30 years. Secrets had destroyed them in a single night, and Henry knew, as he sat alone in his cell, that no sentence could ever match the prison he carried inside himself.